thank you for watching this ASI Insider. I'm Susan Sutton, editor of Adhesives and Sealants Industry, and today we're talking to Jay Johnston of Covestro. Jay, hi.
Good morning, Susan. How are you?
I'm quite well. Today we're going to be talking about hybrid technologies and blocked polyurethane prepolymers that improve their performance. Jay co-wrote an article on this topic for our October issue. One of the best article titles ever, Put Some Moxie in Your Epoxy. So Jay, when we talk about hybrid adhesives, what does that exactly mean?
So hybrid is a really general term and it could accomplish many things, but in terms of our article, what it meant is that we have epoxy formulations that we're including in urethane segments. So we have a hybrid of epoxy chemistry and urethane chemistry that we're bringing together, and that is what we're calling our hybrid adhesives in this paper.
Okay, and what sort of applications can benefit from the hybrid technology?
So these technologies have been used for 40 years. They were originally used in coating applications where people are putting down an epoxy floor coating, and they actually wanted to make something that was tougher and stronger and adhered better. So they started putting in these polyurethane oligomers, and it really toughened up the epoxy flooring and it made it adhere better. Then it was also used in some sealant formulations. It's also used in molding compounds, but more recently it's been used in adhesive applications. And throughout this paper, what we demonstrated was that by putting in a little bit of this block polyurethane prepolymer into your epoxy, 10, 15, 20 parts, you can actually bump up the tensile strength and the toughness of your epoxy adhesive. So it can be used in industrial and commercial epoxy adhesives, where you're basically looking to bump up your physical properties.
Can you describe the blocked polyurethane prepolymers a little bit more? How do they differ from existing technologies?
Okay, so the blocked polyurethane prepolymers are really a TDI-based prepolymer that's been blocked with an alkyl phenol material. That's a little bit different than what most people think of when they think of a blocked polyurethane, because most of the blocking chemistry is designed so that it's heat activated. So people would have a blocked polyurethane and a reactive compound mixed together. It would be one component. You would apply it, and then to get it to cure, you would heat it up. But in this case, that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about room temperature curing materials. So you would take your epoxy system, add in your blocked polyurethane prepolymer, and that is stable at room temperature. You would then mix it with a second component of an amine, and at room temperature, you would get a reaction. And this reaction basically will improve the physical properties of your epoxy.
Okay, great. You talked about this a little bit, but can you go into some more detail about the benefits that the blocked polyurethane prepolymers can impart to a formulation?
So the blocked polyurethane prepolymers add a lot of benefits to the epoxy chemistry. The first is it lowers the functionality of the epoxy. Epoxies are typically highly cross-linked and they form brittle materials. By incorporating this blocked polyurethane prepolymer, you can actually lower the functionality of the system and get very high elongation properties from a few percent up to, say, 300%. So that's the first benefit of it. Another benefit of it is toughening. These blocked polyurethane prepolymers, when put into epoxies, will actually act as a toughening agent. And a lot of people look for a toughening agent for epoxies. There's a lot of technologies out there, but most of these technologies, they actually slow down the cure. The interesting thing with this technology is these blocked polyurethane prepolymers actually catalyze the epoxy reaction. So generally the epoxy reaction is slow and sluggish. By putting in these blocked polyurethane prepolymers, you actually can get a faster demold time. You get a faster gel time with the part. The other benefits they have are physical property benefits. One of them is vitrification. Typically, an epoxy material will actually vitrify before it's fully cured. And when it vitrifies, it freezes out the end groups so that they can't react. So you end up with a polymer which is lower molecular weight than what you could normally get. So by entering in this block polyurethane prepolymer, you will create a polyurethane phase which will actually have a lower TG. So the material won't vitrify because of the TG. You will actually get a higher molecular weight, and that's why we see the tensile strengths and the elongations of these materials actually increase. Now, I mentioned that these materials will actually phase separate from the epoxy matrix. So the epoxy matrix is very rigid, and you're putting in these very flexible urethanes, and they form like their own domain. So if you have like crack propagation down your epoxy, what will happen is it will enter into these very flexible areas. That crack tip will be distributed over a much greater area, and so it'll take greater force for that crack to propagate. So that means you will get higher tear strength values, you'll get higher impact resistance values by putting in this block polyurethane oligomer into your epoxy. The other benefits to these materials is there is some bio-based content in the newer versions that we've just launched, and also the newer versions have a much lower viscosity. Some of the older version of these block prepolymers had viscosities of 60 to 100,000 centipoise, and that would typically raise the viscosity of your epoxy formulation. The newer block polyurethane prepolymers typically have a viscosity around 20,000 centipoise, so it doesn't raise the viscosity of your epoxy resin. So what you will get is a material, a formulation that's easier to mix. If it's an adhesive, it will mix more thoroughly. And then if it's a coating application, you'll actually get better flow and leveling, have a greater ability for the contractor to apply the material.
Interesting stuff. Jay, thanks again for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks for talking to me on this snowy day here.
Absolutely. And thanks for watching. To learn more, read the article on adhesivesmag.com. Again, it's called Put Some Moxie in Your Epoxy, or visit Covestro.com. Thanks.
Thank you.